Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our Oki 811 webinar today. My name is Renelle Freeman. I am the Contact Center Services Manager here at Oki 811. Today's webinar is Locate Request Entry, and we're going to talk about best practices for safe and efficient locate request entry. So whether you're new to the process or looking to streamline your current practices, this webinar will provide that knowledge and some tools to make safe and efficient locate requests using our Oki 811 online platform. Just a couple of housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen-only mode. So if you have questions throughout the webinar, you can enter them into the chat feature. Your questions may be answered throughout the webinar, or we will do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Today's topics, we're starting out with excavator preparation and responsibility. So what you need to do ahead of time to prepare to submit your locate request and the responsibility you take on as an excavator. We'll talk about what vital information is required for a quality locate request, those important details to make sure we put in a quality locate request. We'll talk about best practices for entering the locate request details with an overview of the Oki 811 excavator portal entry and the mapping. And then we'll talk a little bit about scope of work limits, and again, we'll do a Q&A session at the end. So first up is excavator preparation and responsibility. As an excavator, get to know your work site prior to contacting Oki 811. That means getting the address, the driving directions, whatever intersection you're working at, and then determining what your specific locate area is in that description. Where is the work taking place on site? And then another important thing to do is to verify there's any access issues. Those are important to put on your original ticket to ensure a timely locate. Next up is white lining. This is the best practice of marking the outer limits, the route, or the perimeter of a proposed excavation with white paint, flags, or stakes. It's going to save you time and save the locator's time. And then establish a field contact. The field contact needs to be the person who can answer any questions regarding the excavation project. And just as an FYI too, as of November 1st of this year, the law will specify that the locate request is required to include the name and phone number of an excavator field contact that has actual knowledge of the excavation site and project. Then you're going to want to determine your start date and time. So when does your crew plan to be on site to start the work? There is a minimum 3 business day notice, but there is a maximum 10 business day notice as well. So you can plan ahead and put it in a little bit sooner if you'd like to do that. And then you're ready to contact Oki 811. Go to www.oki811.org to start putting in your ticket for the excavator portal. And once that locate request process is finished, of course, you want to confirm before you start your excavation project. As the excavator, you are required to confirm positive response by each member listed on the ticket. You can use the Oki 811 positive response system to do that, and then also check the site for markings. And then, of course, respect the tolerance zone, respect the markings. The tolerance zone is a strip of land that is 2 feet on either side of the facility, plus the width of the facility. If you happen to be digging within that tolerance zone, just exercise reasonable care by hand digging or other methods with approval from the owner or operator. And the operator may request to be on site while excavating for your project. So the Oki 811 excavator portal, which again is at www.oki811.org, clicking on the excavator portal at the top of the page, is the most efficient method for ticket entry. There's not going to be any hold time. You're going in there, you're entering your ticket details, and then you have the ability to direct submit that ticket to the facility operators, meaning you get an immediate ticket number. It's available 24/7, 365. So it doesn't matter what time of day it is. If it's a holiday, you can submit that ticket. Another great thing about it is your excavator information is saved, but you can update it with each ticket submission if you need to change the contact person. And then you have some find and view ticket features as well. And then just to let you know, we do have a new portal interface coming very soon, hopefully in Q3. It will be more mobile optimized to use for any device, better searching capabilities, and many more improvements. The interface may change a little bit, but the vital information needed to submit a quality locate request that we're discussing today remains the same. So some of the vital information that is required first up is project location. Of course, you need a physical address, you need an intersection that you're working at, or driving directions to the site. So if a physical address is available, of course, you're going to provide that complete address, and you'll want to be sure to include the house number, the prefix, street name, street type, street suffix. It's a lot, but it's all of the elements of that address. Including that complete address will help you determine the location on the OKI 811 portal map, and it'll help locators find the correct location. When you break down all of the elements of an address, that house number, prefix, street name, street type, all of those pieces of the address work together to help determine where it's located within that given city. The prefix in the address tells you which side of town the address is on, and it's an integral part of finding the address. And then the street type identifies which road the address is located on if there happens to be more than one road with the same street name. And you'd be surprised how often that happens. For instance, in the example on the screen, we have 2505 Northwest 60th Street. In a lot of instances, there could be a 2505 Northwest 60th Place or Northwest 60th Circle. So that street type is very important to ensure the locators get to the correct location. If a physical address is not available, of course, directions or a specific intersection that you're working at are required. In the address field, when you enter the street the work is taking place on, including that prefix, street name, street type, suffix, and the corresponding fields. And then the cross street field is the nearest cross street, including the prefix, street name, street type, and it should be intersecting with the street listed in the street name field. When you're providing driving directions, you want to start from the closest intersection to the dig site, which is most likely the intersection you listed in that street name and cross street fields. You're providing compass direction and distances between each turn, because remember, you're telling the locator how to get there. They need that information to get to the accurate location if there's no address. What side of the road is on? And then if you can provide some property identifiers or other physical identifiers, that's very helpful as well, especially in new construction areas or rural areas. So an example of that is from the intersection of Northwest 60th Street and North Villa Avenue. Go west 100 feet to the pole number 1234 on the north side of the road. That's pretty simple. You've got your starting point, you've got how far to go, what direction to go, you've got a physical point to get to, and what side of the road it's on. And then if you're doing work at an intersection, you want to include the intersection details and what corner of the intersection that you're working in on the directions field. So an example of that is northwest corner of North Villa Avenue and Northwest 60th Street. If that's where you're working, then you're providing that specific corner. How accurately and completely you enter all of this information on the web form to submit your ticket will determine if the map will find the specific area for you, making that process quicker for you, and then will help the locator get to the correct location. The next piece of vital information that is required on a ticket would be your marking instructions. This is a description of where the area your digging is taking place on the property. And then of course, once you're out there on site preparing to put in your locate request, outline that specific area in white if you can. So some examples of marking instructions, and they can be kept very clear and concise. It does not have to be a novel. So one example is a certain part of the property, such as the front yard, backyard, full property, if you're working in the rear easement, front easement, that sort of thing, but only if you need the entire part of that property marked. If you don't need the entire front yard or you don't need the entire property, then provide a specific path of excavation. But an example of that is simply put as locate the front yard. The next example is a radius of a physical object, such as a marked area, a stake, a pole, an intersection, and then include the general location of that physical object. So an example of that would be locate 25-foot radius of a stake on the northwest corner of the house. Again, very clear. A certain width of the linear path along a physical path, such as a white lined area, along a pole line, a fence line, temporary line, a road, etc. You're including a starting point, an ending point, how far and what direction you're working, what side of the road, how wide of a path. So lots of details there, but it still can be simply put. And so some of the examples that I have here is locate 5 feet on either side of the white marks from the north side of the house, working north 150 feet. So again, we're providing how wide of a path we need along those white marks. Our starting point's the north side of the house, we're working north and we're going 150 feet. Another example is locate 5 feet on either side of the existing fence line that's located on the north side of the property, and it's approximately 200 feet. It's helpful to provide the distance on that, even though that north fence line should be visible, just so the locators have that ahead of time and they know how much area that they need to locate. Locate 5 feet on either side of the temporary line from the structure, northeast approximately 150 feet to the pedestal. And then another example from an intersection is if you're working from the northwest corner of the intersection, locate 10 feet on either side of the white markings on the west side of the road, working north 150 feet. So again, very simple, starting point, ending point, telling them exactly how far, what direction they're going, what side of the road, how wide of a path. When you're providing marking instructions, you also want to be sure that you're stating any access issues to the property. So we talked about that's something to look at ahead of time. So you can put that within your marking instructions as well. So let's talk about the OKI 811 portal mapping. So when you submit a locate request on the OKI 811 portal, the mapping plays a very important part in ensuring that all of the registered facility owners are notified on your locate request. The area that you draw on the OKI 811 portal map determines what facility operators are notified on the locate request. A majority of the OKI 811 members, those facility operators, they register their service areas by GPS points. So even a small discrepancy in the drawing on the map can affect who's notified. So just be sure to provide that accurate information. Inaccurate or incomplete drawings can result in the wrong facility operators being notified and can lead to those potential damages and accidents or loss of life even. Be sure you encompass the accurate location and be sure to encompass the entire instructions or locate area as you've described on the ticket. For example, if you're working from an intersection going east for 200 feet on the north side of the road, that entire 200 feet needs to be encompassed on the map as well as the written locate area description on the ticket. So when you're on the portal map, the orange marking that you make on the map or the system makes for you, that's your indication of the dig site, and it should again encompass the entire locate area described. So OKI 811 is sending notification only to the facility operators or the OKI 811 members that are registered in that polygon. And there is a slight buffered area on top of that, not shown on the map as well. There are multiple data points within the OKI 811 portal mapping to aid in finding your dig site. I'm going to go through some of those data points, show you some examples, and explain some of the other mapping features. The map contains address points, parcels, street data, 100 block data, and lots more. So if an address is found by the mapping system, the system will let you know that. When you enter the address and you pull the address, you'll get a pop-up telling you that the result is detected. And it lets you know we found an exact match for that address. Would you like to use this address as your work area? It also highlights it in red as a kind of a temporary marking showing, hey, this is where we found it. It lets you know in order to notify the correct facility owners, the polygon must cover the entire dig site. Same thing I've been saying over and over. So depending on your locate area for this job, will determine if you're going to hit yes on this pop-up or if you're going to hit no. So if your job happens to be staying within the boundaries of this address, such as front yard, backyard, full property, then that's encompassed. And you can hit the yes button and then the system will just auto mark it for you and it'll turn to that orange marking that I showed you in the previous slide. If your marking instructions go outside of the boundary of that property, such as you need to locate the front of that address and then both sides of Northwest 60th Street, both sides of Northwest 60th Street is not covered in that marking. So that means you would hit no, and what you'd have to do at that point is manually mark it on the ticket. We have a couple of different marking tools that we'll discuss here in a little bit, but you would use one of them to encompass the entire dig site. And the example is shown right here. If you needed front and both sides of the road, it would look similar to this. It's crossing that road. If the address is not found by the mapping system, that does not mean you can't put in the ticket on the portal. Again, we have so many data points on our map, the parcels, the addresses, lots of surrounding information, even in those areas that may not be as developed or just missing data for whatever reason. So if the address is not found, you'll be presented with multiple mapping searches to help you find that address. The next best thing to finding that exact address that we just talked about is a result that says exact street segment. And you'll see it in the mapping results on the right side. What that means is it didn't find the exact address that you entered, but it did find the 100 block it falls in. So in this example, we have 2013 Northeast 29th Street. It did not find 2013 exactly, but it did find the 2000 block. So it's going to help you get to the area and at least have some surrounding data that you can look at to help determine where that address falls. You can look at all the different surrounding data points, lots of addresses to see. We're obviously in the 2000 block. Most of the time you can also determine which side of the road it's on if you don't know. Most cities follow an odd and even rule if you know that, or you can look at the map and see that this is an odd address that we're looking for, 2013, and the odd addresses are on the north side of the streets based on all these other surrounding. So you know it's on the north side of the street. You know it's somewhere between this north-south road, which is Martin Luther King Avenue, along Northeast 29th Street. And there is one address point for that area of 2053. You can see the numbers are getting higher as I go east. So I know it's somewhere within this span. You can use resources on your end. If you've got plat maps or you have directions or whatever it is, you can use that to mark a more precise area to determine where 2013 is. But you have all this information to know that it's within this span. If you have to, as a last resort, you can cover the map for this entire area, just kind of covering all bases of where that address would fall. Not necessarily, you're notifying the companies in that area, but the locators are going to respond to the information you have in the worksite information. So they're just going to go to 2013. This is just to ensure that we notify all the companies in that area since we're not sure exactly where 2013 is. But do that with caution. If you find yourself marking more than an area, let's say up to a block, to cover the possibilities of that, then get some driving directions and follow those on the map and mark based off of those driving directions. Other search results for the map are an intersection result. And again, these are the results that are showing up in your search results on the right side of the map. So the intersection is another great tool. That means the exact intersection was found, and it will work even if you've put in an address or just an intersection. As long as you have something in the street field right here with the prefix, the street name, and street type, and suffix if it's applicable, and you have something with those same elements in the cross street field, that's what it's looking for. It's looking for those intersecting streets. So you can use that to find your intersections or to even just kind of zoom you into an area. There's also a similar address result. And what that does is it pulls similar addresses to what you've entered in the address field. So if it didn't find the address you entered, like in this example, 2615 Northwest 60th Street, the similar address result will find similar addresses in the same 100 block on that street, and it'll list them here. So you can find the one closest to 2615. You can click on it and it'll zoom you into that area. It doesn't mark anything or highlight anything. It just takes you to that area. So again, you can look at the surrounding data to figure out where it's at. In this example, it's pretty simple. Logic tells us exactly where 2615 would fall. Here's 2613, 2617. We see the numbers are getting higher as we go west, lower as we go east. So that's where that address would fall. It just so happens that we don't have a point there for whatever reason. Other results would be exact street. So what this is basically is if it did not find the address, it did not find the 100 block, it did not find the intersection, the next thing it's going to find is exact street. It's a broader search. So of course, if it's looking for a street that happens to run across the city, when you click on it, it's going to highlight it across the city. So you'd have to have some more information. You'd have to have a nearby cross street or just kind of know the general area of where it's at. It does in this result pull up an intersecting streets as well. So if you'd happen to have forgotten to put the cross street in the cross street field already to look for that intersection result, then you could actually pull it from the intersecting expansion as well. And then the street begins with is just a really broad search. It's just looking for the street name or number that you entered into the street field. So like in this example, 60th Street, it's only looking for that. So it may pull up other prefixes and street types and kind of surrounding areas too. So if you use anything under that result, just be careful that you're choosing the right selection. We also have some additional results for just reference, points of interest like churches, schools, graveyards, that sort of thing. They'll come up under a points of interest result. You can search for these too with the searching tool that's at the top right-hand corner of the map. But these should be just used for reference and not just a single point of reference. You need an address or something else to go by to make sure that they are correct. And then we have a highways result as well, where you can select the highway and it'll highlight the highway in that area. And there may be multiples of the same highway listed. It's just because of the way they were drawn in. Other mapping tools are there to help you in the map search or the map drawing. So we'll go over these real quick. We have multiple layers. The map layer is your default layer that we were just looking at with your parcels and address points and that sort of thing. And then you have the Oki labeled aerials, which is Bing aerials, but then it has those address points that you see in this picture over here and the parcels on top of that. So it's like the best aerial view to look at because all of those things are there for you to see at once. But then there is also just a Bing labeled aerials, which is just like going to bingmaps.com. It's not going to have the parcels and the address points on top of that. And then the points of interest that we just talked about, you can select this to actually label those points of interest on the map in the area that you're looking at, and same goes for restaurants. There's a measuring tool. You can use this, our Oki 811 portal mapping system, to even follow out your driving directions or even obtain your driving directions if you know where the area is. So you can use the measuring tool to determine those measurements. It's very simple to use. You just choose the tool, you single click to start the measurement, and it'll show you in miles, feet, and yards how far you're going. And then you just double click to end that measurement. And it'll also put a little stamp there showing how far you went. The clear tool will clear any markings that you made on the map. So if you did make some measure lines on there and you've got multiples on there and it's kind of getting a little too crowded and hard to see, you can clear those marks and they'll go away. You don't have to clear them because they're just for your use. They're not going to go on the ticket in any way, but you can clear them to make it a little bit cleaner if you need to. The sketch tools, these are kind of like the measuring tool. It's like a temporary marking on your map to kind of hold your place. So there's a couple of different options. You can sketch a point, a line, and then you can sketch by the XY, which is the GPS. And these just put a little sketch on the map and you can label them. So if you want to look at multiple points, you can do that. And you can label them to keep them organized. Most people use the sketch by XY for when they're entering multiple GPS coordinates for linear paths. So if they've got like a starting GPS and an ending GPS for a main line that they're installing or something like that, then they'll put both of those GPS coordinates in there so that they can see them on the map and make sure that they mark the area to encompass those GPS coordinates. So it's a really handy tool if you're somebody who puts in GPS coordinates or multiple GPS coordinates. And again, same thing applies to these sketch tools with the clear button. You don't have to clear them, but you can if it's getting to be too much. They don't go on the ticket anyway. They're purely for your use. The marking tools, we have 3 separate ones. The first one is the mark radius tools, just as it says, it's a radius of a physical point. That you can clearly see on the map, and that is our suggestion. If you're going to use this tool, it needs to be something you can see on the map that you're marking a radius around, or at least a very, very close area that you can see. So if you turn on the aerial, and in this example, you can see the dugout. If I needed a certain radius around that dugout, then you could use that tool, or an intersection or a stake or that sort of thing. The next tool is the Mark Line tool. So this would be just for linear passive excavation. So like if you're doing some road construction work and you're working a linear path along the road, if you're doing some main line work, pole lines, sidewalks, that sort of thing. Anything that's a linear path, like one single linear path from one starting point to the ending point. Because it is just a Mark Line tool, and it does show you the miles, feet, and yards as you're using that as well. So it kind of doubles as a measurement tool as well. And then there's the Mark Area tool. This is your main marking tool for if you're having to manually mark the dig site. It's just a free form polygon for any type of excavation. It does require at least 3 points for you to use it. So that means, you can't just draw a line with it. You have to have 3 points, and you can't intersect those points either. But it's really simple to use. You just single click to start making your polygon, single click at each corner wherever you want to make it, and then double click to finish the polygon. And then we have another Enter GPS tool that's similar to the Sketch by XY, it's just a little bit different. You're entering the Latin long in here. It's putting a little temporary marking on the map showing you where that Latin long is. It's just with this tool, you can only do one single GPS coordinate at a time. One thing that our system does do is if you enter a GPS using the GPS tool, it puts that GPS on the ticket automatically because that's helpful information for the locator. And then it does check when you draw on the map to ensure that you've encompassed that GPS in the drawing. So it's just kind of a validation there to make sure that it is encompassed in the drawing. And it'll warn you if for some reason it does not. So let's talk about scope of work limits for a moment. So per the Oklahoma Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Act, for any locate request, the type and the extent is not to exceed 500 linear feet in incorporated areas, so that's in town, and no more than 1 linear mile in unincorporated areas, which is outside of town and rural areas of the proposed work. So if you have some jobs that you're putting in that are linear jobs along the block or something like that, you'll need to follow those parameters to submit those tickets. And we're going to talk about some examples. But first off, some general rules of submitting those tickets is always provide a physical starting point and stopping points when possible. That can be an intersection or an address. Again, like we've talked about already, include what side of the road you're working on. If you're working in the alley, is it both sides of the alley? Is it one side of the alley? Is it in the alley? If you're in an easement, is it rear easement, back easement, front easement, that sort of thing, providing all those details for the locator. You can use intersections for reference on either side of the road, even if the work is only taking place on the other side or one side of the road. So if you had like a T intersection or that sort of thing, and your work was taking place on the south side of the road, but that road only goes north, you could still use that as your reference point because something's better than nothing as far as providing that physical point. And of course, when you're putting in the ticket, cover the entire described area on each ticket to make sure that we're notifying those facility operators. So in an example where you're working along city blocks that are less than 500 feet in length, as you guys know, when you're working in different cities, the blocks can be different lengths. Majority of the time they're less than 500 feet, but there are some times when they're more, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But if they are less than 500 feet in length and you're needing multiple blocks, you're going to simply just separate those tickets by each block, describing each block span on one ticket. So in this example, the total job is the north side of Southwest 40th Street, which is this street right here, from South Ross Avenue, which is the street here on the west, going east to South Lynn Avenue, which is the street on the east. So there's 2 blocks here. The total distance of that 2-block area is about 900 feet or so. I can't put all of that on one ticket because this is in town and it's no more than 500 feet per ticket. So the next best thing to do is look at the distance between each block. I can see it's less than 500 feet by my measurements. So ticket 1 is going to describe the area of Southwest 40th Street from South Ross Avenue to South Miller Avenue. So again, including what side of the road you're working on. So it would say from South Ross Avenue and Southwest 40th Street, locate east on the north side of Southwest 40th Street to South Miller Avenue. And then ticket 2 would pick up at Miller Avenue, going east to South Lynn Avenue, the same concept. Makes it easy in separating block to block if that's possible. Something else I like to point out too, in these types of jobs where you're working multiple blocks, if you're doing road bores across these streets that you're working across, then you need to kind of indicate that on the ticket too. So if you're splitting them up by block, one way you can say that is, for instance, on ticket 1, from South Ross Avenue and Southwest 40th Street, working east 1 block to the east side of South Miller Avenue. So you're indicating that on the ticket that you need them to go to the east side of South Miller Avenue because you're crossing that road. And then of course you would want to encompass that area as well. If you're working in city blocks that are more than 500 feet in length, it gets a little bit more difficult, but it doesn't have to be. So in this example, the area along Southwest 45th Street here between Miller Avenue, which is the street on the west, and Villa Avenue, which is the street on the east, is a total of about 1,320 feet. So way more than can be put on one ticket. But if I needed that entire block because I was doing mainline work or something like that, then you're gonna have to do 3 tickets essentially. So basically 1,323 feet total divided by 500 is 2.64. So you round that up to 3 tickets. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Oops, sorry about that. You can, the first best option based on this example is to use an address range. So in this example, we do have some addresses here. So an address range, or providing an address range, is a physical object that a locator can follow, and it's probably the easiest thing to do. So in your 3 tickets, what you would have to first do is kind of determine what addresses are in each 500 foot or up to 500 feet span. And you can do that all in our mapping system by measuring that using the measuring tool. So I can see this first address of 2661 right here, all the way up to 2629 is within 500 feet. So on my ticket, I can use that as my address range of 2661 to 2629 Southwest 45th Street. And then of course you would provide what area you need located at that address range. And then ticket 2 would just pick up where you left off at 2625 and do the next 500 foot span. 2521 would be the end of that. And then your third ticket, again, pick up where you left off. It's going to be less than 500 feet to the end of that job. If you don't have addresses to go by, you can definitely use some driving directions. The first ticket example would be pretty easy. From this intersection of Miller and 45th Street, locate the north side of 45th, going east 500 feet. That's pretty simple. Ticket 2 gets a little bit more complicated because you're going to have to provide some driving directions to your starting point since you don't have any other roads close by. So it's from the intersection of South Miller and 45th Street, travel 500 feet east, and then locate 500 feet east. And then your third ticket, same concept, travel 1,000 feet east and locate the remainder of the job. On that third ticket, alternatively, you could start from Villa at that street on the east side and work back west too if you wanted to. The same ticket splitting logic applies to the rural locations that are up to 1 mile per ticket as well. So just a recap of what we talked about. Avoid your downtime, avoid delayed projects and damage by preparing ahead. Obtain project location details ahead of time, white line the area if you can, prior to submitting the locate request. Then you're going to be sure you provide that accurate and clear descriptions of the project area, including the address, the intersection or driving directions, and the description of where the work is taking place on the property. Driving directions and descriptions should provide starting points, distances, compass directions, and what side of the road. Facility operators must have a proper understanding of the dig site in order to respond accurately and timely. On the OKI 811 portal map, the polygon drawn on the map must encompass the entire dig site as described to notify those correct facility operators. And then once you get to this point to where you're ready to excavate, confirm before digging. Check that positive responses on the OKI 811 excavator portal, and then check the site for markings as well, and then respect the marks. Before we move on to any questions, we would like to request for you to fill out our survey. Your feedback is critical to gauging your satisfaction with this webinar, as well as helping us to meet your needs on future webinar sessions. All you got to do is grab your phone, follow that QR code to our webinar feedback form. We are doing something right now. If more than 50% of the attendees do provide feedback, they will be entered into a drawing for $25 Amazon gift card. And if you don't win, you can have another chance during any live webinars the rest of this year. And if for some reason you can't follow that QR code, there'll be a link in the follow-up email for you. I'll leave that up for a moment while I check for some questions. So it looks like we had one question looking at the map on the screen. What if we only need the front yard located? Would we only highlight the front half? And then, yeah, looks like I answered that question during the webinar. So it doesn't matter ultimately as far as if you mark the entire parcel or if you just mark the front yard, that's completely fine as long as it's covered. When I train and when our agents on the contact center side, we train them to just mark the entire property unless it's a large property or something like that. So, but just as long as it's covered, covering just the front half of the property is fine, and you can turn on aerial to determine that. Next question we have is, what is the best way to revise the office manager contact for our submissions, name and email? So depending on how you're set up as far as for the excavator portal, you can't change the name on the actual portal registration, and you can't change the user login email. But if you want to set up a new one for that office manager contact, you can do that under their username or under their email and their name. But if you have an existing one where you have a caller name in there that still exists and you want to just keep it, you can change the contact person. You just can't change the user email address. So moral of the story is, if you have a new contact, just make a new account for them. Next question we have is, all driving directions should be based on the map layers from the portal. Sometimes street types are different between Bing Maps and Google Maps. It could be a mix of the two. So I understand what you're saying. Basically, sometimes our maps might be a little bit different from Bing's Maps and Google Maps, and then they're different is because data comes from different resources. We get our data from county assessors mostly. We pay for some of the data as well. So you could, if there's kind of variances on the names of the streets or street types or something, you can kind of just notate that on your ticket to specify that, because that'll help the locator too if they're looking at Google Maps versus our maps or looking at Bing Maps or that sort of thing. So a variation of both of those would be helpful. Next question is, will we still be able to access previous submissions if we create a new portal with new contacts? Okay, so this is in relation to changing that. So basically the way that a registration on the excavator portal is set up is it will show you, if you set it up with the exact same company name as that previous portal account, like, and I mean down to the character usage, spaces, that sort of thing, then you will see any submissions under that exact company name within the last 30 days. And if you want some help with that, I can do that offline with you. This comes up sometimes, and I can tell you exactly how that old portal account is set up, or you can look at it yourself under the excavator panel. When you go to edit the excavator information, you can see exactly how it's formatted in the company name field. And so your new portal registration, you would just put in under that exact company name, with including spaces, characters, that sort of thing. So I'm not seeing any more questions. I'll give just a few seconds here to see if anybody's got any more. Doesn't look like anybody's typing. So we definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us for today's webinar over best practices for submitting your locate request. I hope you have found the session informative and valuable. We look forward to your attendance in future webinar events, and I hope you all have a great day. And there was one last question there about having a hard copy for the presentation. This would be available online once they post it on our YouTube channel. A hard copy, I probably can send you one. I'll get your, if you don't mind putting your email address in the chat, I can send that to you. I'm not sure if that's available, to be honest with you, on our website. I have to check on that. But the recorded session will be on our YouTube page once they get it posted on there. Yeah, if you'll put your email address in there, I can send one to you, if you don't mind doing that in the chat. If you need assistance, I can definitely provide my contact information. The best way to reach me probably is by email, and that's rfreeman, so RFREEMAN at okie811.org. And I'll put that in the chat. And I can answer any questions about portal entry or the locate root process in general. And Judy, I will send that hard copy to you. All right, thank you guys, and I hope you all have a great day.